Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network. Any opinions or comments made by any guest are their own, and they do not necessarily reflect any of the presenters or network's opinions.
Many times in the history of our civilization, the introduction of a new thought has brought skepticism, even ridicule. Despite this, there always has remained the duty and inalienable right to tell the people the truth.
Hello, this is Nick Pope, and you're listening to the Paranormal UK radio network, the UK's biggest paranormal network. And this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Very good. I love doing shows like this. I'm having so much fun. No, I love the free-flowing conversations, not when it's just, here's a question, I want your answer, here's another question.
Hello and welcome to the show. Thank you for that introduction, Nick, and thank you for those kind words, Erin Montgomery. Okay, first thing, I must apologise that there was no show last week. There was a few technical difficulties which led me to have to cancel putting a show out. Unfortunately, I'm sorry about that. If you were expecting a show, you may well have had to listen to a repeat show if you were expecting a new one. I'm sorry, but there you go. Okay, right. As I always say, thank you for the messages and comments that you send me. I'm glad some people out there are enjoying the shows. I have to say I put it down to the great guests, of which today there's another great guest, which I shall mention in a moment. But if you would like to get in touch with me any time, my email address is davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. That's davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. Okay, as I mentioned, we've got another great guest today. This is Paul Ascough. This is his second visit to the show. He was on some time back. His new book has just come out. It's a refreshing and new slant on the subject of UFOs. It's called UFOs, The Real Story. It looks at the bigger picture with all of its complexities and is interlaced with many of the author's own sightings throughout his life. He was employed in the medical field all of his career. Before retirement, Paul was a qualified nurse, occupational health nurse and paramedic, spending 13 years with both the regular and territorial British Army around the world, gaining perspectives in people and places that would put him in good stead for his ideas and experiences that contribute to this amazing work. A wealth of information for the enthusiast or beginner to get their teeth into. Paul covers a multitude of subjects from UFO abductions to the paranormal, how they can overlap, and this will leave the reader in no doubt that truly strange encounters occur and how they can intrude into our daily lives wherever you are. Paul Ascough was a member of the British UFO Research Association, BFORA, for many years and uses over 50 years of experience in ufology to bring a better understanding to these fascinating subjects, showing that the truth really is out there. So I'm very pleased to welcome back to the show Mr. Paul Ascough. Hello Paul, welcome to the show.
Hello David, and thank you for having me.
No, it's great to welcome you back. It's funny enough, it was the 11th of November 2019 the last time you were on the show. And since then, that was just before the world went pear-shaped, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, unfortunately, but you're right, yes.
So it's crazy. The time, it seems such a long time ago that I spoke to you. But then again, it doesn't seem so long ago, if you see what I mean. We've had so much going on this year in between, and you've got an exciting story to tell, but you've written your book, UFOs, The Real Story, which you're going to tell us all about, I hope. Yep. But, yeah, I mean, it's funny how time flies, and it sort of goes slow at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like we've been busy doing nothing for the whole year.
Yeah, exactly that. And in fact, when I looked, I thought I wanted to see what date it was you were on the show. I was surprised it was 11th of November 2019. I thought, blimey, that's just before everything went funny. Well, not funny, but as I said before, pear-shaped.
Yeah.
But,
Just
anyway,
before I went on holiday for the last time, David.
Yes, and strangely enough, you're right. Yeah, I mean, nobody's been anywhere, have they, since? I mean, I've not been able to go anywhere. I mean, nobody has. But I don't suppose we ought to dwell too much on that. But it's I know you like your holidays as much as I do. But well, I suppose you've got to just make do with the garden now, and you're getting your suntan in the garden.
Yes, but it's if the sun's shining, I go brown. Thankfully, I'm one of those people.
Yeah, I'm one of them as well. When I say no, we're not one of those. I
knew what you meant.
Anyway, Paul, sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, you've got an exciting thing about UFOs, the real story, the book that you've written. So that's a development. When did that all start?
Well, it's expanded and developed from when we spoke last. And what I've tried to do is, without being too scientific, because I found that what people tend to do is you get these people that come off like sort of put the psychological slant onto things, and then they go really deep and go off on one, they lose you. And it's the same on the scientific front, when people are trying to put scientific handles on things and saying this works this way and this works this, and people switch off. And I think for the normal, as I would class myself, a normal, and you, David, guys that want to pick up a book about UFOs and the paranormal, you want something that you can relate to, and you want something that's relatively easy reading without you having to stop and go back and try and digest something. You want something that you can take in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I understand that. Of course, both of us, I think that the view you've got to have is if you've seen a UFO, you actually know that they exist. I mean, there's probably people that will pick up your book, not knowing, not having seen their own UFOs. I mean, I've seen UFOs and, I know they exist. So, but I mean, there's so many books out there. I mean, how would your book be any different to any others?
Right. Well,
because I mean, you called it a real story, so it's got to be your real story.
Yeah, it is. However, what I tried to do, because I have had a lot of spiritual and paranormal experiences, as well as seeing UFOs, it sort of led me, I'll just say, set me off down a certain path. And I don't believe anything happens by accident. There's no such thing as coincidence. When the time is right in your life, these things will occur and you will be set off and nudged down a certain road. And nothing happens by accident. You don't meet people by accident. Everything happens for a reason. And I think you steered in the right direction, and that's what happened to me. Very briefly, what happened was, on the paranormal front and UFOs happened within probably a year of each other. So would you like me to go into more depth of that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, what had happened first was we'd just moved to a new home on the outskirts of a village on the West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire border. And we were just in West Yorkshire, a small village, and we're talking 1968. So it's a lot of years ago. There was not quarter of much aircraft in the sky. There was not the light pollution. And
no, I mean, 1968, I was still in my pram. No, yeah. I'm joking.
But anyway.
Some people might believe it. Sorry, Paul, I'll digress. Cool.
No, that's fine. But what happened was, I was sat, my father was saying goodnight to my father, my brother and I, and my father was in the front garden, and our normal routine, father was very strict, wasn't cruel on anything, but he was very strict, and you did as you were told. And our last job of the day was taking our dog and the neighbour's dogs for a walk. And my brother and I did that, came back, then we'd say goodnight to our parents and go to bed. And this night, father was in the front garden, tending to his roses like he usually does, We went outside to say goodnight, and he sat looking at the sky until we were looking due east. Our house faced due east. And to the north, the sky was completely covered in cloud, which stopped very abruptly at a sharp bank of cloud, if you like. And then the whole of the southern sky was completely clear, not a cloud in it. And because it was dusk, it was probably end of August, beginning of September. So it was just after my 11th birthday. And you could see the first of the larger stars and the ones with the greater magnitude and the brighter constellations were just sort of starting to appear. Mm. So my father, he had a telescope. He wasn't an astronomer by any stretch of the imagination, but he always had an interest. So he used to like to point things out to us. So my brother and I sat there, and he's literally pointing to one of the constellations. And as he did, with this, the three of us are looking at the sky, these two UFOs came very quickly, moving very fast, out of the bank of cloud, and then stopped dead. There was no deceleration. Boof, they were still. And when they were still, they were a brilliant, pearly white, perfectly circular ball of light. There was one slightly to one side and slightly behind the other, but nothing apparently joining them that you could see. There was never any noise. There was no apparent rotation or strobe lights or anything else between them. And they were still for a few seconds. And as they came out and went stationary, I got a very clear, I would say, male voice in my head that said, "Oops, we hadn't meant to have been seen." Mm-hmm. And that was all I got, but it was quite clear inside my head. And we sort of, the three of us are looking at the sky, mouths agape. And as we did, they then set off at 90 degrees from where they came out, parallel with the edge of this bank of cloud, to what was Thorpe Marsh Power Station, a coal-fired power station, which was about 8 or 9 miles away as the crow flies. Now, we couldn't see it because the terrain where we were was very flat, really. So it was just over the horizon, but we knew it was there. And they stayed in the same relative position to each other, no acceleration, and they were moving fast away from us. Now, as they did move, when they got close to the cloud and sort of how it's sort of this undulating front, if you like, as they got closer to it, you could see the light from them shining and reflecting off the surface of the cloud. But at the back of them was this small, really tiny little teardrop shape, almost like an atmosphere around it, if you like it was generating something around it. And we just watched them until they went out of sight. The three of us stood with our heads upwards in silence until they'd gone. And throughout, there wasn't a sound. There was no noise whatsoever. And when they disappeared in the distance and we could see them no longer, my father was the first to speak. And he just said, "There's nothing that we've got that can do that." Mm. And he'd done his national service. He did 3 years in the RAF. And it was like from that moment on, as you said, when people see these things, it's quite obvious to me then, it was quite unequivocal that this was something, for want of a better term, alien. Mm. There was no aircraft that we got at that time, even at this time, that could do what that did, or look like that, or move like that. And I wanted to know straight away the physics behind it. How could something like that physically move like that? How could it look like that? And so why wasn't it in the newspapers? Why wasn't it on the television? Why weren't people talking about it?
You get that sudden realisation. They're real, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, immediately it was almost like I realised that sort of they'd been there all the time and we just hadn't noticed type of thing. It was like you accepted them because when you see it like that, it's so obvious, that, as they say, it wasn't a lighthouse shining through the trees, or it wasn't military flares or a police helicopter. I mean, they weren't police helicopters in those days anyway, but.
No. When you heard that voice in your head, was it actually in English or was it kind of a fake?
Yes.
It was actually in English.
Yes. Perfectly lucid English statement in my head.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering how, I mean, if it's, I'm just trying to think of it as an alien. I wonder if it, or is it your brain that turns it into an English message? Yeah, like they send like a feeling.
Right.
You see what I'm trying to say? It's like a...
Yeah. Right, well, if you'll just bear with me, when we move on to other things, I'll come on to that.
It's like I've got a habit of doing that. It's
No, it's fine. It's a perfectly logical thing. But I'll go on to that later, okay. Why I think that happens. So, not long after that, I then started avidly reading books on UFOs. Now, at the time, as you may be aware or not, as the case may be, in 1968, you couldn't just go on the internet. There was no such thing.
Oh, no, absolutely. I know. Yeah.
So you had to get off your bum and get out there and go to places where you could even find the books on UFOs.
Yeah, they were pretty rare even back then, weren't they?
They were.
There were quite a few paperbacks around, and most of them were American ones.
Yeah. I remember going to my local cities on the bus service or the train and finding out that even to find a library or bookstore that actually stocked the books on UFOs was difficult enough, you know. So, but that's when I started. I just got book after book after book that I could. So I was an avid reader. And I have to say, my parents or even my siblings didn't realise, because as you're growing up into your teens, as you're aware, your friends, your school friends, your hobbies, cars, motorbikes, young ladies all take preference in your life. And so other things like church that I've been brought up with, and mum and dad doing everything for you, tend to take a back seat. Now, the reason I'm telling you this was in that year we moved into this new house that was about 100 yards away from a spiritualist church. And my father already had work colleagues that went there. So although we'd been brought up Church of England, we started attending, as smaller children, we started attending the spiritualist church. Now, as we got older and into our teens, we didn't attend. But my parents still did. And one day I'm going out to meet some friends, and because it was so close, we had to walk past the spiritualist church to get anywhere type of thing. And as I'm walking past, there's this old guy stood outside with this old pinstripe 3-piece suit on, having a cigarette outside. And as I'm walking past, he said, Paul, have you got a minute? Now, I didn't know him. I can't say I'd honestly recall even seeing him before. But he obviously knew me, and I just assumed at the time he knew mum and dad, which you would, you know. Like everything in life, people try to rationalise things. So. And he's outside the church smoking away, so I walked over towards him, and I didn't say anything. And as I'm walking towards him, he said, thanks. He says, have you got a minute? And he got this scrap of paper out of his pocket and a little pen. And he wrote down, and then he showed me what he'd written down. And he'd written the 3 letters UFO. And he showed that to me, and I can remember being quite dumbfounded, because my parents even didn't realise I was into it that much, never mind the stranger. And he showed me, and then he said, I've just been told by Spirit to let you know that you're thinking along the right lines. And it was sort of blew my mind, really, because it was like...
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, how can anybody that doesn't know me know that? And that sort of led on to things, because it was then quite obvious that there was more to the spirit realms, if you like, than I was giving it credence for, shall we say.
Yeah, so you've suddenly got that realisation that UFOs are real, and spiritual things are real as well.
Yeah. So this went on, and I did see 1 or 2 what I would call lights in the sky. I was very fortunate that I had an uncle who was in another group that was based in sort of the bottom end of Nottinghamshire, Leicester, that sort of area. And they were going down to Warminster to meet Arthur Shuttlewood and the group down there. Now, I'm talking probably 1970, 71, something like that, when the Warminster mystery was quite big, and it was the Warminster thing was even reaching national news and headlines type of thing. And they were going, and he turned up on the doorstep one night and came in and had a cup of tea with everybody, and he said, I'm going down to Warminster next weekend, can Paul come with me? I've got an empty car. So obviously, being the parents that they were, he went through the right channels, if you like, to say, I'm going down, can Paul come with me? And so, fortunately, they said yes, so off we went. And the following weekend, we drove down overnight, and I remember the first afternoon, and I may or may not be wrong, but as far as I can remember, we met at Arthur Shuttlewood's house.
Wow.
And it was this whole sort of honey, stone cottage. It might have even been a semi, but I can remember we had a tea and a scone in the garden. And there's all these guys around me, they're talking about vibrations and licks and all sorts of things that I'd never heard before. And then we had one night, we went to the Cradle Hill sky watching. And then during the day, my uncle and I went down to Salisbury Plains, to the Stonehenge. And then the next night we went to Clay Hill. And I remember talking to Arthur Shuttlewood on a few occasions. And we'd seen a couple of lights in the sky that were unexplained, but they were just that, lights in the sky. And then I was actually stood, because for me as a young lad, I just turned up and I'm just looking at the sky, and these all came and they got the comfy chairs out and the flasks and all that, and it was like, they've obviously, they knew what they were doing. And I was stood there talking to Arthur, and he was telling me that because I'd just been reciting the tale of us going down to Stonehenge, because then you could actually go up to the stones themselves and stand between them. Yeah,
I remember those days. And the roads weren't so busy, were they?
Oh, yeah. But I remember standing between them, pretending that I was Samson type of thing, and taking my picture. But the reason I'm telling you this is I was talking to Arthur, and he said, he walked down from Stonehenge one night. He says, we were late at night, and he walked down the avenue to the Heelstone, which is now next to the road. And he said, he walked down to the Heelstone. He says, and I was on my own. And he says, we kept looking at the sky. And he says, I backed up to it, so I was resting on the stone. I then put my head back so that my head was on the Heelstone. He says, and I was facing Stonehenge. And he says, and as I'm looking up at the sky, he said, I got this like a musical note. And he says, he said, almost like a colour that went straight up from the Heelstone and was going straight up into the heavens type of thing. And literally, as he's telling me this story, he just got the words out of his mouth when there's a few people going, ooh, and this light suddenly appeared in the sky again. And we just watched that, but again, it was just a light in the sky. So it was just, for me as a youngster, it was a kick in the pants, if you like, to say there's more to this than meets the eye, and as I said, it's these experiences that appear to point you in the right direction. What I'm trying to do is I'm moving on to explanations on one of the chapters in the book.
Oh yeah, I know, you've got to put it all together like a jigsaw, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of my, what can I say, philosophy is, people tend to do, dare I say, Rendlesham Forest, or Roswell, or the Pascagoula incident, or anything, but they tend to do, like at the moment, the thing is with Trinity, and again, it's American in the early days after the war, but people tend to do a piece of the pie. They tend to do just a piece of the jigsaw. And what I've tried to do, because my experiences have led me down this path, if you like, I've tried to put it all together to show people that there is more things to it. There is a bigger picture, and that we need to be aware of the picture to make sense of it. So, I'll carry on with an explanation, if I may, David.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we'll go to the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, at the moment in time, we'll say we deal with the ordinary matter around us. That's what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And we have radio waves at the higher end, and then you come down through the infrared, and then the visible light and the acoustic spectrum that we use all the time. And then you go down through the ultraviolet, and then X-rays and gamma rays at the bottom end. Now that is ordinary matter that everybody's familiar with and everybody interacts with on a materialistic every day of their lives, yeah?
Or nobody really thinks about it, though. They just sort of, they just live their lives, don't they, without actually taking any of that into consideration.
Yeah, it's just around us all the time.
Yeah.
So, then there's, I mean, the modern cosmologists and astrophysicists and these people with much better brains than I, they're bandying figures about now of between 75% and I've heard as much as 95% of the energy in the universe, dark energy and dark matter, is what the universe is made up of. And the actual ordinary matter that we're aware of, and we can sort of measure, is only about 5% of what energy is available in the universe. Right?
Yep.
So the visible light and the acoustic spectrum that we deal with is less than 1/10 of 1% of the ordinary matter that we know. So our ordinary matter could be only 5%. So we only deal with less than 1/10 of 1% of 5%.
Yeah.
And there's all that going on around us all the time. And that is part of the problem that, because we don't, as far as we're aware, anyway, as far as the normal public's aware, we don't have the technology at the moment to look at the dark energy and the dark matter. Now, I believe that ET, I'll use that phrase for now, ET are complete masters of the whole of the electromagnetic spectrum, including dark energy and dark matter. So they can completely control, they're aware of it, they use it, and they're masters at controlling the whole of that 100% of the spectrum, where we only aware of 5% of it, and out of that 5%, we use less than 1/10 of 1%. So you can see what we're up against. And it's the same with you're there now. You have an aura, if you like. You have an energy field, same as I have an energy field. So we know, David, that if we meet, we know immediately if we're going to get on. And that's because your energy reacts to my energy. So that's why like attracts like. That's why people know. I mean, you may get somebody and you know straight away their frequency is different. You know that you don't get on with them, and that's because of your energies not matching. Yeah,
it's a strange feeling, isn't it? I've experienced that, but I've also experienced it the other way around as well. Where you meet someone you think you like, and you think, oh, I'm not so sure now.
Yeah, but that's it. It's the energy, because everybody's energy changes as we mature and as we go down our own paths. Your energy, because everything is like Albert Einstein said, everything is energy.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything. So you, the chair you're sat on now, the computer you're in front of, the room you sat on, and even the building, they all have a magnetic field and a magnetic energy that to some extent we can measure. However, every thought that you have is an energy, and the intention behind it. So your brain, it don't have a hard drive, it don't have a memory stick, it's all electrical energy within there, and that's how it works. And that is why ET, being masters of it, can control exactly what we see, what we don't see, what we remember or don't remember, and that is why it is so difficult for the normal public, if you like, unless you physically see something that is as bizarre as my first sighting, and people do, but if you don't, then it's difficult to get it over to get your point across to say, this is happening. And I will quite categorically say here and now, UFOs are around us all the time, constantly. We just don't see them because they're on a different frequency to us.
Yeah. No, I could agree with that. I mean, I've spoken to so many people now that I've come to realise that that's what's happening. That a lot of the time they're just invisible to us, and sometimes there's a slip up of some sort, or something happens, and then we suddenly can see them for a few seconds, even. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting concept, I must say, and it's a concept I can quite believe, because nothing's solid. Everything is basically atoms and electrons, so everything can go through each other. So yeah, it's quite an interesting concept that I can actually believe.
Yeah, and then to go on from that, if you imagine every thought is an energy, your memories are energies, they can pick up on that. Therefore, I'll just digress slightly and just go sideways a little bit, but people like Dolores Cannon, Bud Hopkins, and more recently Kath Marden, they will tell you when they're talking to the abductees, sadly Dolores Cannon and Bud Hopkins are no longer with us. But I was very fortunate at one of the Bufora conferences one year. I was helping chaperone, shall we say, the speakers to and from the stage, and it just happened quite by chance that I had lunch with Bud. And we were just talking, and I said, how did you get into it, Bud? And he just said, quite by accident. He said, I was an artist. He said, I was doing...
A good artist as well, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And he says, I was doing hypnotherapy as more to go down the counselling road to help people. And he says, it was purely by chance that I'd regressed a few people and they were coming out with these stories. He says, looking at it now retrospectively, he says, whatever walk of life somebody came from, however much money they have or didn't have, and wherever they were geographically in the world, these people were nearly coming out with identical stories. And he said, that just is more than chance. He says, that can't happen. And he said, it sort of led me down the path. There's obviously more to it. And he says, and the more I dug, the more I found. And he says, and in the end, he says it's just the evidence really, although there's no, as Paul Sinclair would say, there's no proof, it's overwhelming, circumstantial evidence. But the reason I mentioned these was when they've been talking to abductees, they say everything is done by thought. And that is why I think you will never ever have the problem of language. Because whatever language you speak, that thought goes into your head with that meaning. So it's how you perceive your language. Whatever language you speak, that is what that thought is in. Yeah. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's like a code, I suppose, and it just sort of translates it for you.
Yeah. So that is why you will never find communication problems with ET, because they use telepathy and they speak by thought. And all communication is by thought. So language don't come into it because you're getting the whole impression, so you know exactly what it is and the intention behind it. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yeah. It does.
Then the other thing which I have sort of come across a lot is, there's a few things, but I will just go on to abductees often say and often report that there is absolute silence. And I mean absolute silence. There's no hum of traffic in the background or wind in the air or birds in the trees. There's nothing. And that is because they're not where they should be. They've been tuned out of our acoustic spectrum. So you can't hear anything because you're on a different frequency.
Right, yeah.
So again, that is indicative of me that you're in the wrong place. And you often hear them say there was an odd atmosphere and it was completely silent. Yeah. And that's because ET is, if you like, tuning into them and tuning them out of their frequency where they should be to move it up.
Yeah, it's like a radio show, I suppose. You're listening to a show, but of course there's other shows alongside that you can't hear. So you're actually going into one of those other positions.
Yeah, exactly like that. So, moving on, I believe that's often why people have this visceral terror. You know, when people say they're absolutely scared to death and really frightened.
Yeah.
I've come across a few that I've investigated myself when I'm with Bufora. And one of the ladies there, she said it was like I was in a nightmare and in a quagmire, and I just couldn't run. My body wasn't obeying what I wanted it to do, you know.
Yeah.
And she had this visceral terror. Now, I think that on a subconscious level, your body does a lot of things. Your body has the fight and flight syndrome, if you like, which is a normal reaction to it when it's under threat from whatever. But I also believe that your own soul, your higher self, your own frequency recognizes when it isn't on the frequency where it should be. And therefore, you get this fear because it knows it shouldn't be on that frequency. And I would say that is also true, not only of encounters with ET and on the UFO type front, but we've also had a lot of instances of that where people with the paranormal and also with cryptids like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever, you know. And they all report that they were absolutely terrified. Now, I'm not saying they all do. I said that wrong. But a lot do. And I think that's because your frequency recognise that it's been, what can I say, taken or accidentally stepping into a frequency where it shouldn't be. So it recognises that at a deep subconscious level, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, does that take us into other dimensions? Is that what you're coming from?
Yeah, yeah. So that's why you get a lot of people where, like paralysis even, they say that I didn't feel paralysed, but I couldn't move anything. And that's because, obviously, our nervous system works on electrical impulses. So it's like memories. An abduction that I did for Bufora in 1995, 4 adults. I can remember quite clearly, one of the male adults, he said again, it was an odd atmosphere. And he says, and I can clearly remember saying, why is it dark so quick? How is it suddenly so dark? And he said, looking retrospectively now, going back to it, he said, you can more or less, however long, you can more or less recall things in chronological order, even though if you don't remember all the detail. You know that you did this, then you did B, then you did C, and so on. But he said, my memory for that night was, if you imagine it being on a videotape, he says, and then being it cut up into pieces, and then a lot of the pieces being thrown away, and some that were left being spliced back in the wrong order. And I thought that was quite a good graphic description of somebody trying to rationalise and how he was trying to put it into words what he could naturally remember. And people are like that all the time with these instances. I mean, look at Calvin Parker. He's just come out now when Kath Marden regressed him, and Calvin would have bet his life, bless him, and he is on the mend, thankfully. That he'd just had the Pascagoula with Charlie Hickson, and that was it. But he actually had 4 encounters. One later, but 2 early ones when he was much younger. But again, he didn't recall it. He didn't actually remember it. And that is because your memory is an energy. And they can remember. How many times do we hear instances of investigators going to abduction cases and the abductees say, well, I can remember a vehicle at the side of the road. Or I can remember an owl. I remember seeing an owl. And what they can do, in my opinion, is substitute a more friendly, if you like, something more acceptable, a more acceptable memory that you know something's happened, but is it a bizarre act of kindness on ET's part that they don't let you remember it all, that you just remember a selective small amount of it?
Sure, yeah.
We get in all these pieces of the pie, if you like, and pieces of the jigsaw, and people aren't putting it together. And through my experiences, for good or for bad, I've sort of, if you like, come out with this sort of, I'm not saying it's a solution, and I'm not saying it won't change, but to me, it's a theory that works. And it sounds logical, and the more I sort of add to it, if you like, the more I go down the road, the more corroborative evidence I'm getting rather than contradictory. So I'm still running with it. And at the moment, it does seem to explain quite, if logically, dare I say, even though I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination, it does explain things much easier and puts it into terms that people can understand.
Sure, yeah. Oh, you're not a scientist, but you have got a medical background, haven't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, if people do buy the book, it'll say on it, I've been in the medical field 47 years. Yeah. I was fortunate to retire not long ago, and now I just do a bit of first aid exams and things like that, but otherwise I don't do anything now. It's great. And I think that's one of the things that it's allowed me time to go back over this and think about it, to expand it and think, yeah, there's more to this. I need to try and, get a grip of it. But it's not easy because, going back to Paul Sinclair, it's the truth with no proof.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough to have Paul Sinclair on the show twice as well. He's got his truth proof books, and he's got and the fourth one, the Night People, I believe it was called. Yes, yeah. Just looking at my bookshelf there, Night People.
Yeah, excellent book. The other things as well, to go on, talking of, and Philip Kinsella is another.
He's another one, yeah.
Yeah. You get these people that have had all these experiences, and they're all slightly different, but they can all be explained onto this.
Yeah.
One of the things that I go on to is how, I'll still use the phrase E.T. Chris Evers liked the phrase the visitors better, but I said, well, if you say E.T., people automatically say that with it. Associate, So what I'm going to say was how E.T. are able to hone in on people, or suddenly appear, or suddenly disappear in the craft and themselves. There's instances, well, we'll use Malcolm Robinson's instance for once, the Decmont Woods with Robert Taylor in 1979, where initially, to Robert Taylor, the UFO or the craft appeared transparent, appeared see-through, and then went solid, and then the balls came out the bottom and came towards him. And there was an incident in America, the Gaffney incident, where, again, it was a police and then a young couple saw a UFO, and they said they saw the outline. They said they thought it was just an outline, and then it was sort of transparent, and then it went solid. But as it went solid, it was coming through some trees towards them, and the trees caught fire. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is, if you're moving down through the spectrum, you're moving down into our visible wavelength, and I'm saying down because as you come down into our visible wavelengths that we can physically see it all, just before that is infrared that generates heat. So as with the Gaffney couple, they saw something solidify, but at the same time the shrubbery and trees around it burst into flames. Now they were terrified. They still reported it after the event. The fire service turned up, the police turned up. The police took a statement, the fire service put the fire out, but the UFO was long gone. And it's just one of these instances, another one that you can explain what happens, why things can suddenly disappear, why things suddenly do appear, if they're moving up and down the spectrum. Like how many times have we heard, especially, I won't mention any names, but military airfields and things where people can physically see something out of the control room, the tower, but there's nothing on the radar. Or you'll get them on the radar, but they're looking out and there's nothing there. And that's because they're just in a different frequency. It's like one of the things that make me laugh, where you get these people on that say, "Oh, we couldn't have been doing that, you know, the G-forces would have killed you," or whatever.
Yeah, it's an entirely different science, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And they say, "Oh, there was no heat plume, there was no flight surfaces, you know, how can anything do 10,000 miles an hour?" It's absolutely load of rubbish. At the end of the day, they are able, and this is one of the things that I believe I saw when I saw those first two UFOs, was they're completely surrounded in their own little pocket, in their own little universe, if you like. So that is how, we'll just take the recent ones with the Nimitz encounter, things like that, how they were under the surface of the ocean and then suddenly went straight up to 50,000 feet or whatever it was, however many thousand miles an hour. At the end of the day, if you're in your own little pocket of universe, because it's a completely different frequency to ours, just because occasionally it's moving through our visible light, they're completely in control of it. So it doesn't matter if they're going through space, if they're going through our atmosphere, if they're going through the lakes and the oceans. It's not there to them. And it's the same with speed and movement. Doing a sudden 90-degree turn or doing 10,000 miles an hour may seem ridiculous, but to them, they're not even moving. Everything's controlled by thought. So our physics don't even apply. So why we are trying to say, you know, what can move at that speed and what can do this and what appeared to come out of that volcano or what was in the sea or what was in space, it's irrelevant to them.
Yeah.
It's only as we perceive it.
Absolutely. Would you put time travel into that perspective as well?
Well, now that's something that I haven't got into specifically because I can't get my brain around it at the moment. I can understand the differences in frequencies and how that can affect it. And obviously, better brains than I look at. See, we're going back again, putting our perspectives on things, where Einstein said the closer you get to speed of light, the slower time moves. But is that just our perspective of it? And being at a completely different frequency, as part of dark energy, if you like, or dark matter, does, like even the galaxies, the nearest galaxy being 4.5 million light years away, does that even come into it? If thought is instantaneous and they may be on a different parallel dimension completely, does that even come into it? Now, there's a lot of things like that that are very odd, and scientifically, I don't think we can prove one way or the other, because we currently, as far as normal everyday Joe is aware, do not have the technology to even measure it, never mind build it.
Or even the brain power to think about it.
Well, I think we could have the brain power to think about it. And I'm not talking for myself, but I'm talking to some of these scientists that can think outside the box. It's just the problem that they have is they can't prove it. They can't scientifically prove it. And because they can't scientifically prove it, what can you say, you know?
Yeah, I suppose you can imagine anything, but actually proving it's another matter. But
yeah, exactly. And that is one of the things, going back to Philip Kinsella and some of the other abductees and the experiences that people have had, how they question E.T. can move them out through the ceiling or move them out through a wall or even through a closed door. And it's quite simply the same as all the others. They tune that frequency. They tune that physical person to where they are. So that wall isn't there. It's there on a different dimension. It's irrelevant.
Exactly. A lot of those stories have got their own little similarities, aren't they, that you can connect. That sounds very much like another incident.
And this would explain it. And I think, going back to this bizarre act of kindness that they don't let us recall all the nitty-gritty of it. I think you get, in my personal experience, I've always thought and had the impression that E.T. was friendly. Now, I know that people that have been terrified may think the exact opposite of that, and I can completely understand why. But at the end of the day, could it be that we are, if you like, if you had where you are, even David, you'll have local nature reserve where once a year people go out with nets, trap the local wildlife, measure it, make sure they're all healthy, make sure they're a certain weight, and let them go again. So I'm not saying, but is it a possibility that they're doing exactly the same with us? And it's a bizarre act of kindness that they're not letting us remember all the details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, also, there could well be, as I've heard before from different people, there's quite a few different alien races. There's not just one.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That are visiting us. Some are benevolent and some are not, Yeah.
Now, I believe that if you'd mind me using a little analogy that I've used in the book, if you imagine that our ordinary matter, that 5% that we're on now, is an old vinyl LP, we'll say, yeah? So you've got an old vinyl LP, and we are somewhere on that vinyl LP, living our lives, learning our lessons, having our current experience that we are. And everybody's in the same boat. To the outside of the record and the edge where you would put the stylus on the record would be evil. Not necessarily evil, but I'll say evil, just to make it easier. And then the centre of the whole way you put it on the thing is God or purity. So we are somewhere on one of them grooves trying to progress towards the centre, right? Just accept that as a basic analogy for now. So what you're doing, you cannot remember any past lives, past experiences or anything else, normally. Therefore, because if you did, it would be a waste of time. So therefore, you have to now, using your thoughts and the intention behind it, lift your vibration and use your life with nice morals, good ethics, and helping other people, and to raise your vibration to improve, to get towards this hole in the centre. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, right? So, I believe this is like a universal constant with all life forms, all intelligent, sentient life forms, including E.T. Now, if you think we're on our record at this level, and look how far we've come just in the last 100 years, 100 years ago, if you were very fortunate, you could afford to get on the new trains to get anywhere. Nobody had their own car, apart from the very rich, and if you were lucky, you had a horse, so that was it. You caught a stagecoach to get anywhere. That was only in just over 100 years. Now look at it now, how far we've got now, where everybody's got their own transport, we've got the internet, we've got all this information at our fingertips. Look where we might be in, say, 1,000 years or 10,000 years. And E.T., I believe, have advanced that far. Technologically, they may be more advanced. However, as you said, there may be, and I believe there definitely are, many different types of alien races. And they are still bound by the same things. It's the same distance to the centre of the record for anybody, whatever record you're on. However high up in the stack of records you are, it's irrelevant. You still have to get to the centre by your own effort. Therefore, is that what E.T. is doing by not letting us remember and not being as cruel as they are, or as cruel as they could be? Because that's one of the other things where people say, oh, they're going to invade and all this, and absolute bull. I'm not going to swear, but anyway.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I can always bleep you out, don't worry.
What a load of rubbish.
Yeah.
Had they wanted to wipe us off the face of the earth, they could have done it years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to say, with that analogy, I feel like this planet's stuck in a scratch at the moment, but that's another story.
Yeah, well, that's it. And you have to lift yourself out of it by your own efforts. Nobody else can do it. And people often say, well, I'll be sorted out when I die. Well, you won't. At the end of the day, all you will do, in my opinion, is it's like getting out of an old car and getting into a new one. You're just trading it in for a new model. So it's the nub of between the groove that you're in now and the next groove. So your thought process is still the same. You still have to make that effort. You still have to marshal your thoughts and use it consciously and be aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I often think sometimes, do some people actually die and then sort of jump straight back into another baby and sort of be born again straight away? But, that's just my brain working on that. But
no, yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, at the end of the day, whatever people think and whatever people experience and however people are brought up, that and whatever community you're in, that will colour your thoughts and beliefs and the way that you think things are. If you're brought up going to church and you're brought up, it's constantly being reinforced all the time. But should you move away somewhere or move to a different community, then obviously you don't have that same sort of hammered into you all the time. It's not taken as gospel because you sort of have to make your own effort and do it by yourself. And that's another reason why I believe that, and I'm not saying it's all bad, because there are good and bad people in all walks of life, including religion. But going back to the analogy of the record, it's the same distance to the centre of the record for anybody. So it's totally irrelevant if you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whether you're Mormon, whether you're Hindu, whether you're Buddhist.
Well, no, you're heading into trouble now because you can't leave anybody out.
Yeah, well, it's the same distance to the centre of the record for anybody. So that's why I said you do get good and bad in all religions. So religion itself is only a carrier to carry you so far. At the end of the day, it's you that has to make the decisions. It's you that has to think, and it's you that will move your body forward rather than letting religion hold it back. Yeah. Whatever religion that may be.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, Paul, I must say. I've never thought of it along the lines of a record before, but it's one that I won't forget easily, I know that.
Yeah, well, it's just, what I've tried to do is put these concepts over by using analogy that people can understand, yeah. Because I'm not a theologian, I'm not into that particularly. I mean, I was brought up in the Streets Church of England. I had to do Bible classes and all the rest of it. But,
yeah, well, I was lucky. I missed out on all that. But
yeah. Oh. When I started nursing, I started my nursing career in 1975 as a cadet nurse doing my SRN. And the senior sister that ran the School of Nursing was a Catholic nun. And I'm not going to mention any names. But to think she was a Catholic nun, she could be downright awful. I mean, we were all young kids wanting to be nurses and trying to learn as sponges, taking it all in. And she could be downright, what can I say, vindictive and spiteful. And
no, I do know what that world's like, because my ex-wife was a top, she was a SRN nurse. We're separated a long time ago now, but she was one of the top nurses. But she told me a lot of stories about what the hierarchy was like and everything,
Oh, yeah.
It was actually quite a nasty atmosphere. And I think it's still much the same now. There are a lot of medical staff are under threat for, if they don't say anything about certain things and, as you know.
Yeah, very true. Very true. So there you go. I hope that's given you something to think about.
Yeah, very much so. Excellent. I mean, obviously, there's the OLM conference coming up in Hull in August. I can't remember what the date was exactly, but you'll be talking
21st and 22nd.
21st and 22nd. You've got to remember it more because you're doing the talk there. But yeah, we're all looking forward to it, and because we all need it, I think, to get away and get to meet all our friends again. And we're looking forward to Peter Robbins coming over.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned Bud Hopkins earlier, and Peter Robbins was a close connection to Bud Hopkins, as you know, and so that'll be interesting. And let's hope he can make it over. You know, that the planes are all flying and everything. But you've got all your talk ready and everything, have you? Yeah,
just about. It just needs tweaking a little bit. But unfortunately, I'm not a technophobe really. It's like I'm not into computers really. So I've got good neighbours, dare I say, that are much more geeks than I am.
Well, they're going to do some graphics and stuff for you, are they?
I'm just doing a PowerPoint presentation.
Right, yeah. But I'm really looking forward to it. I think your talk will be very interesting, as will everybody else's who's going to be there. So if everyone hasn't bought their tickets yet, the OLM conference, which is the Outer Limits magazine conference in Hull, was it 21st and 22nd of August? I'm sure you can find it online. I'll put a link to it on the Paranormal Dimensions page anyway, at some point. But anyway, Paul, it's been great talking to you again after all this time, and I'll be seeing you obviously in Hull.
Yeah.
Can't wait. We'll all be getting together. I'm sure there'll be quite a party there. There'll be quite a few friends all meeting up again after such a long time.
Yeah. I promise I will shake your hand and give you a hug.
Oh, thank you, and I will too. There's none of this elbow touching with me. I've just hope and I've got to wear masks and things like that because I think I'll be stepping out otherwise.
Yes, me too.
But no, I'm hoping we won't be in that sort of situation by then. Let's hope not, anyway. Okay then, Paul. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been great. And your book is available on Amazon.
It is. It's available now as a paperback, as an ebook, and I believe it's either available right now or very, very shortly as an audio book too.
Audio book as well. Good. Well, I've got to get myself a copy, and I'll get you to scribble it for me when I see you.
Yeah, certainly.
But, anyway, Paul, it's been fantastic having you back on again after all this time, and I will look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, can't wait, David. Be lovely.
I'll let you get on with your evening now. Good night to you, and good night, everybody.
Thank you, David.
You're right. Take care, Paul. Cheers. Right, you've been listening to Paranormal Dimensions on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm David Young. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Unidentified flying objects, commonly known as flying saucers, do exist. Some kind of flying objects have been photographed in the sky. If they cannot be identified as objects known to man, what are they? If they are not man-made, who made them? If they are not from this planet, where are they from?
Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
spotted in China. Oxygen, medical supplies and hospital staff have
One of the 5 vaccines in research.
Stage 1, you create a problem. It could be a manufactured virus. You want a reaction, and you want them to either say, do something, or you want them to accept what the authorities suggest must be done. So one of the agendas is to massively cull the population. They want to reduce the numbers.